No, you don't have to spend a whole lot of money to get some really nice firearms, and that's what I'm going to talk about today is I give you 7 of the best budget guns worth buying. And I didn't do anything special. I just walked into my local gun shop. I seen these 7 and I was like, man, this is going to make a really great list for somebody out there because not everybody has the budget of $500, $600, $700 to spend on a nice gun, and you may think, oh, I have to buy High Point with my budget, or I have to buy Sky, and I'm here to tell you that you don't have to go with those manufacturers. You can go with reputable manufacturers and get a really solid gun at the same time. So no matter if you are in need of something for concealed carry, home defense, competition, teaching, plinking, whatever the case may be, this list will cover all of these kind of guns. And I think came up with a really good one here. So of course, I'd love to hear from y'all, man. What are some of the best budget guns that you know of that maybe you own or maybe that you've recommended that you think are really good and definitely worth buying? Make sure you leave those things down below. I definitely want to hear from y'all after the video. And if you like what I do, consider subscribing. You could also join us on Patreon or join the channel right here and gain access to some pretty cool perks and join the SHOT team. Love to have you guys join. Let's go and get into it. Now, one of the first ones I'm going to talk about here is actually still one of the best striker fire guns that I've ever put in my hands as far as the trigger, and that is the Walther PPQ. You have front and rear slide serrations. You have a decent set of 3-dot sights. I think before they discontinued these guns, which was really the end of just this past year, they actually had like excess sights on them. So, you know, pretty decent set of sights. A really awesome grip texturing, right? It almost struck the perfect balance because it wasn't too aggressive, and yet it just felt really good in the hand, super just natural pointing, and shared a lot of common features with the P99, specifically the P99 QA model, which the P99 has since been discontinued as well. But the biggest thing with the PPQ was the trigger. It was just a step above pretty much every other striker fire gun out there. You know, then they introduced the PPQ 45, and then they had the PPQ 22, and now, you know, they've dropped that line in favor of the PDP, which is a better gun. It is a better pistol. I've done a review on a PDP. By the way, any of the shooting that you see on some of these guns, it might be kind of old because it's been a while since I've shot some of these, but just remember that the quality typically on the shooting part of this video, or some of the shooting in this video, is going to be a better quality now than what you may be seeing. But just keep in mind, a lot of these guns date back quite a ways to when we first started YouTube. So I just want everybody to kind of know that. But regardless of the quality of my videos and how far those have come, the PPQ is and has been a staple in the self-defense world for a long time. And since they're discontinued in favor of the PDP, you can definitely get them at a much cheaper price, typically, than what you can the PDP as well. Not that the PDP is like that much more money than a PPQ, but again, if you can find a PPQ on a really screaming deal, it is a gun that I would highly recommend. They have a navy version of this gun as well with a threaded barrel. But if you want some of the more modern features, for example, the ability to put a red dot on your gun, the PDP is definitely the way to go. You know, and you have several variants. You have the PPQ match steels and, you know, all of their, you know, competition race type of guns. And you have several variants. You have the PPQ match steels and, you know, all of their, you know, competition race type of guns, which are super nice. But just the base PPQ for a home defense, self-defense, truck gun, maybe even a training gun. These things are fantastic. They have a little bit higher bore axis, so you may get a little bit more rise in that muzzle. But again, with that phenomenal trigger and the way this gun points, it is definitely one. If you find them on a good deal, for sure, I would say buy it. You know, Bursa has never really made like the biggest splash in the United States. They actually started in like 1951 from like 3 engineers that worked at Beretta. They kind of took some ideas, obviously, from Beretta and started making their own pistols. They had the Modelo 60 or Model 60, Model 62, then a Model 90, but really the Thunder series in the 90s is what kind of set them apart. And while the Thunder series is still carried by their, federal police and law enforcement down in Argentina. Again, it's never really been super popular here in the States. But one gun they have released that has gained some popularity and I think is actually a pretty good option for concealed carry is the Bersa BP9cc. This gun will absolutely surprise you on how good the trigger actually is. And that's the first thing that I noticed about it, besides the fact that it is a little bit bigger, but it feels incredible in the hand. Now, it uses a couple of interchangeable parts. So the rear sight is interchangeable with Glock. The front sight is interchangeable with Sig. It's like 21.5 ounces and it's 4.8 inches high. So think about the Sig P365 XL as far as the height. So it's got a really good feel in the hand, points super naturally. It's got a really decent grip texturing. And again, the trigger on this thing is incredible. From what I've read, it's pulling at like sub 4 pounds, which some people may see as, for a concealed carry gun just being too light. Typically, it's a little bit lighter than what I'd like to see, but at the same time, I'm really intrigued with this thing, so much so that I think I'm gonna buy one at some point, maybe, and kind of see how it does. These things have been out for a long time. They're nothing new by any stretch of the imagination, but they're still being made, and you can get them at really good pricing. And they're almost big enough to where even if you had this as like a like maybe your first gun, you're like, man, I really want to carry this thing eventually, but until I get my permit, I maybe want to use this as a home defense or possibly a training gun. It's not the best for that. And listen, there's not one gun that can really fit all of those roles 100%, great, but this gun might be a good option for that. I mean, like I said, the single slot rail, that'll allow you to attach a light or a laser as a home defense. That's something you probably are going to want on there. And overall, I really like the size of this thing. I think the trigger is amazing. I've already talked about that a couple of times now, and it's got really great grip texturing. The only thing I'm not a huge fan of, or I'm not a fan of at all, is it's got an internal lock. I hate when companies do this. It's just a mechanical feature in the gun that sounds like a good idea until it's not. It's one of those things you think to yourself, oh man, I can lock this gun fully loaded, and yet even if my kid happens to come along, nothing's going to happen. But then again, you're kind of dependent upon an internal safety that could fail, or it could work perfectly fine, and then when you need to actually use that gun, if and when you need to use that gun, it's useless. It's a paperweight. You might as well throw it at the perpetrator trying to potentially hurt you or your family. So I really don't like those. I would keep that thing unlocked all of the time and then just buy yourself a quick fingerprint safe, throw the gun in there, fully loaded, boom, click, open it up if you ever need it. But all in all, for the pricing and some of the features that this gun has, if you can find these on a really good deal, they may be worth buying as well. Next gun I want to talk about is one of the most controversial pistols that's ever been released. That is the Sig P320. First dropped in 2014. In 2017, Sig actually won the contract for the military's, new handgun to replace the Beretta. Now, I actually bought my first P320 in 2015. That was just a year after I started this channel. And it was before all of the drop safe issues started occurring, or reports of that started occurring. Now, I made a whole video talking about, what Sig did, and then, talking about some of the changes and all of that kind of stuff. So I'm not going to rehash all of that stuff out. But the point is that, all of the SIGs that are post 2017, or all of the SIGs that were sent back to them to be fixed and updated, you'll notice they'll have like a really skinny kind of hook trigger. They reduced the mass of that trigger is essentially what they did, and a couple of other internal things. So regardless though, the P320 is still one of the more successful guns since its release. It's actually got a modular fire control unit, and so essentially I can take the fire control unit out of this gun, and then I could put it into a different frame. And whether that's useful to you or not, one thing's for certain, it's super easy to clean these guns. You can change the lowers out to different colors, different sizes, all of that kind of stuff. But at its core, when it comes to a striker fire gun and Sig's first striker fire gun, it has made a huge impact. So no matter if you love it or hate it, it still, in my opinion, is a top 10 striker fire gun that's on the market still to this day. And while you have the P320 Spectra comps, you have the X5 Legions, you have more expensive versions of the P320. Just the standard P320 is still a fantastic gun. Night sights, they have great grip texturings, and they have great grip angles. So one thing I really like about Sig and Smith & Wesson is the same, is just how naturally they point, right? So there's no very minimal adjustment whenever I pull this pistol out and I get it up on target. They're going to come with night sights straight from the factory, and then of course some more expensive ones are going to come, optics ready and all of that kind of stuff. They're going to come with front and rear slide serrations, night sights, and again they have really awesome texturings on the grip. So it's not too aggressive, but again it's aggressive enough to keep the gun locked into your hand. So if you want an original P320, these are going to be great for home defense, training pistols, truck guns, that kind of thing. Even the full-size guns might be good for competition if that's something that you want to do. All the way around, as long as the P320 has been updated, you should have no problems. And from what I've read, and this is just kind of late, there was 100 reported incidents of guns going off, and then 80 of those people were injured. So, and again, I know there were some lawsuits and stuff, but typically you don't have to worry about that anymore. At least since 2017, you're talking about 8 years later now at this point. Now, one thing these guns are fantastic for is home defense. They are good for training. They are good for, even competition if you go with the full-size models, right? Concealed carry. They used to have the subcompacts. Those have since been discontinued. I used to have one of those. But regardless, man, if you get one that's post-2017 or has been updated, you won't have anything to worry about. And that's been 7 years now that they've fixed that, and people still talk about this issue, still to this day. And so they have since fixed it. And again, when it comes to striker fire guns, I think the P320 is still amongst one of the best ones out there, and you can get the original P320 for a heck of a good deal. Now, you may end up coming across like the P250s, and you may be like, oh, that looks like the same exact gun. Just remember that it is based on the 250, but the 250 is a hammer-fired gun, and the trigger is not even close to being as good as the striker-fire version of the P320, so that's just something you want to keep in mind. Now, this next one I know is not going to make some of you happy. You're going to be like, why would you even include this gun on a budget list? But there is a reason for it, so don't start typing away just yet. But that is the CZ75, the SP01, the SP01 Tactical, the CZ Shadow 2 Black and Blue. Now, budget is kind of subjective, right? Most of the time when you hear budget, you think low cost, but that's not always the case. My budget may be different from your budget, right? And so it doesn't always have to mean cheap. And although typically we are talking about, I hate to even use the word cheap, but typically we're talking about inexpensive guns that are good for their specific role. And so again, you might be thinking, why am I showing a $700 to $1,000 option in a budget list? And primarily it's for some of my viewers that have a little bit higher budget. Maybe they want a, high-end 1911, but they don't want to spend high-end 1911 pricing. Or 2011, or, even a Springfield Armored Prodigy. You're talking $1,500 to $2,000 and up for some of these guns. I mean, I recently saw an STI in Allied Arms too that was like $3,500. It is absolutely insane. And so the reason I bring this up is because for a third of the cost of that STI, don't get me wrong, it's an incredible gun, but for a third of the cost, you can get one that I think is, equally as awesome. Now let's say you're like, yeah, but the Shadow 2 Black and Blue you have right there is not optics ready. Well, they do make an optics ready version that's like $1,200 bucks. So for the budget minded person that has a little bit higher budget than what you may be thinking, the CZ75 is an incredible gun. Now, these guns are known as one of the original Wonder 9s, okay? So your H&K USP, your Berettas, your Bursas, your Walther P99s. These are all, I think even the HK VP70 is considered a Wonder 9, right? From the 80s and 90s. But you have a double action pull, and then you have the subsequent shots are going to be single action, okay? And so it was kind of similar to a revolver in that first pull was going to be double action, and then again, those subsequent shots are going to be a much crisper single action. And one of the benefits that the CZ75 has specifically is that the slide actually rides on the inside of the rails. So typically, with most other guns out there, most other handguns, is you have rails, the slide is on top of the rails, it's going to have a little bit higher bore axis. Well, this one actually rides on the inside. So you'll notice how, small the slide is on the CZ75 in comparison with some of the others. And that's why. And that gives you a super flat shooting gun that is really easy to control. And again, if you're going to train somebody, the CZ75 might be one of the best training pistols out there. If you're going to shoot competition, boom. If you're going to have it for home defense, here you go. This is a really good gun. Now, this one is a heavy gun, so it's not going to be, your favorite concealed carry piece by any means. But if you're doing any of those other things that we talked about, and you're on a little bit higher budget, but again, you don't want to spend high-end 1911 type of money or STI money, 2011 money, whatever, the CZ75, the Shadow 2 black and blue, whatever. This is a fantastic freaking gun and one of the best ones that I've ever put in my hands. Another one I want to talk about briefly is the Rossy RB22. They also have the RS22. They have a number of different 22s. But specifically the RB22, MSRP on these guns is like $209, $243, depending on the options that you get. They may go up from there, but this is what I saw. And so you're literally talking about half the cost of a Ruger 1022. Even the Savage A22, which is a takedown model, which is cheaper than the Ruger, but it's also more expensive than the Rossy. Now, I've never owned one of the Rossy 22s, but I just did like a quick search to see if people are having issues with these and talking to the guys at the gun shop, and generally speaking, they're pretty freaking reliable. Alloy steel, they have a free-floating barrel, of course. They are drilled and tapped, and then some of them actually already come with iron sights, fiber optics in the front even. So, I mean, you have some pretty nice options there. But I think this is a really good training tool for about half the cost of some of the other 22s that are on the market. Maybe even a nice squirrel gun or, a varmint gun or something like that. So for literally like $200, you can get a brand new 22, and from what I've seen, these things are pretty freaking solid. The one thing with 22s that I found, and this is pretty much true for all 22s, no matter who the manufacturer is just use quality ammo. You can buy bricks of Remington Thunderbolt, and I understand, I have some myself, it's super cheap, but if you want to run that gun reliably, CCI mini mags, there's a number of different good rounds to run through it. But I think the Rossy RB22 might be a good budget gun worth having. Now, there's a lot of people that are on budgets, but this doesn't only include pistols and 22s. This also includes the AR platform, and I think the Diamondback AR platform is actually a really good place to start. Now, I typically recommend Smith & Wessons, your Rugers, even your Sig, like Tread series and stuff, your Springfield Armory, Saint, those type of, beginner ARs that are factory built, right? Because it gives you a nice, solid platform and a gun that is super reliable straight out the gate, but Diamondback is not one that I would overlook. I found a brand new one when I was in Allied the other day, and I was like, holy crap, man, OD green, it's got almost a full-length handguard, M-lock, and all of the standard features in an AR that you would want. Forward assist, dust cover, all of that kind of stuff, and then the rest of it is just a standard AR-15. Mil-spec trigger, safety, charging handle, but a solid platform in which to build upon. And surprisingly, this one actually came with a really good Magpul stock. Most of the time when you see these sport versions or kind of the base model ARs, they're going to give you just a standard A2 style stock, and that's going to be something that you're going to want to replace because those things just absolutely suck. But this one actually comes with a little bit of an upgrade. And the most important thing from what I've seen, these guns are really reliable. They have staked gas keys, and so, just kind of all those things that you would look for in a really reliable platform. And again, a good place to start for not a lot of money. There's definitely some brands I would stay away from, namely some of the ones that I haven't mentioned here as far as the AR world. And there's a lot of really good ones that I haven't mentioned here because I can't mention them all. But some of the ones that I've mentioned already, including Smith & Wesson, Springfield, Ruger, Sig Tread series, and the Diamondback series are all really solid AR platforms in which to start with for not a lot of money. And one of the best deals on this list is the Ruger EC9S. I found this thing at Allied for $190. I mean, you're talking just a few more dollars than the High Point. When I saw this, I was like, dude, this is an incredible deal. I mean, the MSRP on these guns is not much anyways, and you're going to get some limitations here, right? You're going to have sights that are milled into the slide, which is, to me, the biggest drawback of this gun, just simply because the sights on the LC9S are so much better. The sights on the Max 9 are so much better. But at the same time, when you're talking about, 3 to 5 yards, maybe even up to 7 yards, you can still put shots on target because this gun has a fairly comfortable grip and it's got a pretty decent trigger. Now, a lot has changed since I did my original LC9S review, and there's a lot of things that I pick up on now that I really didn't back then. And namely, with the trigger, even though it has a fantastic break, it's got a really long length of pull, meaning from the reset stage to the wall and the breakthrough on that trigger, it's just longer than what it needs to be, and they've done that with the Max 9 as well. And while it may be longer than some of the other guns that you're going to see out there, like your Shields and, even your Glock 48 or your Glock 43, Glock 42, all of those guns, it still has a really decent trigger. You're going to be limited on mag capacity as well. You're talking about 7+1, okay? The Max 9 is 10+1 or 11+1. I'm drawing a blank there. It's either 10 or 11+1. I'll make sure I leave it up here and get my facts straight. But regardless, man, even with all of that being said, the EC9S for $190, even $200 and something dollars, is really freaking good. I mean, that is a fantastic deal on any handgun from Ruger, right? I mean, that is just amazing. When I saw it for $190, I was like, dang, that might be worth me buying, just to have it simply as a backup carry gun. I mean, it really is that good. And so it's one of the best deals out there that I have ever personally found on a used concealed carry gun. I mean, this thing was nearly perfect. So if you're looking for a good deal, there are ones to be had. No matter if you're on a really tight budget or maybe you have a little bit more money to spend or somewhere in between, no matter if it's a 22, an AR, a pistol, concealed carry, home defense, training gun, whatever, there are deals to be had and you can get really nice firearms for not a lot of money. And that's the whole point of this series. That's the whole reason that I do this, is that hopefully really good people will be able to put good guns in their hands and be able to protect themselves and their families. And these are 7 more examples of really good guns that you can get on a budget. Now, of course, I'd love to hear from you guys. If you guys enjoyed this type of video, I will again make several parts to this series if you want to see it. If you want to check out some of my other videos that involve 7 best guns or 7 worst guns, I have a lot here to choose from along with individual reviews. I also have a new store right here. So if you want to rock some Headshot merch and be a bigger part of the SHOT team, love to have you guys join, maybe get some merch, maybe join the SHOT team on Patreon or right here on YouTube. Whatever your involvement is, man, I really appreciate you guys. Big thanks to all of our community members, all of our patrons, and all of our subscribers for making this channel what it is. Thank you guys. See you in the next one. And as always, holding down.